Today we'll talk about how to deposit into your adrenal bank account so that you can reclaim your energy and start feeling like yourself again. I talk about cortisol probably every day with almost every single patient who I see. And one of the reasons is because cortisol and the adrenal function underlies a lot of what we talk about in functional medicine. So cortisol actually influences inflammation, immune function, blood sugar control, hormone balance and regulation, blood sugar balance, and so lots and lots of things. So cortisol is super important to understand. Cortisol is actually a very stimulating hormone made in our adrenal glands, which we have two of them. They sit atop our kidneys, and they're really important and often very overlooked unless you have Cushing's, which is one extreme, or Addison's, which is the other. But there's kind of a spectrum that falls in between there, and that is often what gets missed. I'm Joya Vanderlaan. I'm a family nurse practitioner specializing in integrative and functional medicine, and I love what I do. I love to help people. I also love to teach people. When I explain adrenals and cortisol to my patients, I often end up using the analogy of a bank account. So we talk about the adrenal bank account. And the reason that this is helpful is because there's certain things we can do that are deposits into that bank account. Things like getting good rest or eating a really balanced diet where we're having good protein, lower carbs, high fiber, nice good fat. Getting good sleep is a deposit. Managing stress well is a deposit. Good exercise, the appropriate level and amount of exercise is a deposit into our adrenal bank account. But then we also have withdrawals like we do in our normal life, right? We've got bills to pay. You don't have a choice. You've got to pay your mortgage. You've got to pay your rent. You've got to pay your electricity bill. And so we have to prioritize those. Kind of no matter if you want to buy a dinner out or a shirt, you've got to pay your electric bill. That's kind of how cortisol works. In order to survive, in order to be able to hit those brakes when you're about to rear end somebody on the road in your car, cortisol needs to pop up and have the ability to do that. You really don't have a choice. So if you're living on very little adrenal bank account balance, you're very easily going to go into debt. And because you have to pay your bills every day, right? You have to get up, you have to get your kids ready for school, you have to go to work, you have to do what you have to do, and all that takes some cortisol. And things that take way more cortisol, so for the really big expenditures, are going to be the opposite of the deposits. So things like really poor sleep, unbalanced or really up and down blood sugar, over exercise, lots of stress. So even relationships, right, can cause that. Then when you are at a point where your bills exceed what your deposits are, now you're living in debt and you need to pay your bills, but then you have to take out high interest loans is what I call them. And that's often things like needing to use coffee to get your body to produce the cortisol that it just has to produce. You're somebody who maybe needs coffee in the morning to function. So what we want to do is minimize the withdrawals. We're going to have withdrawals, but minimize the ones that are choices, right? So spend wisely, and then maximize our deposits. So that's kind of how I talk about the adrenal bank account, in the way of I want to make sure that we're depositing more than we're withdrawing. So you are working on an adrenal budget. There are some signs that you can look out for with adrenal, maybe we can call it adrenal fatigue. So night wakings, oftentimes those 1 to maybe 3, 4 a.m. wakings are some of the first signs. Blood sugar spikes and crashes, carb cravings, or if you get hangry, those are early signs. Early signs also can be if you are sitting or laying down and you get up and you kind of take a minute to get going again, because you sort of have that almost a little bit of a blackout where you sort of get a little lightheaded and vision goes out a little bit when you stand up. That can be adrenal fatigue. Your blood pressure is not adapting because your body's not putting out the cortisol right away that it needs to in order for your body to adapt from a lying or sitting position to a standing position. So those are just some of the really early symptoms to watch out for. So when I think about cortisol, we cannot think about it as a separate issue all its own that's unaffected by anything else. What we really need to think about it as is kind of a web, interconnected with things like our hormones, our thyroid, stress. And so, as you know, with a spider web, if you've ever touched one, I did as a kid all the time. I was very curious. If you've ever touched a spider web, if you move one little part of that spider web, the whole thing moves. So just like this, if you pull on the cortisol piece, the thyroid can be affected, the hormones can be affected, your sleep is affected, your stress is affected, your relationships are affected. Everything goes along with that. Now, that's for the bad or for the good. Then when we affect cortisol for the good, all those other pieces are also affected. So you want to find somebody who understands this, that can help you through this in a knowledgeable way, and not just put you on an adrenal supplement and call it good, but somebody who will check all those pieces and go, okay, well, maybe cortisol is part of the problem, but what if your thyroid is struggling? Could that be part of the reason why your adrenals and your cortisol level is struggling as well? Because the thyroid was not functioning properly. That's a stress on the adrenal glands. We want to relieve that stress and have the thyroid functioning well. In the same way, for perimenopausal and menopausal women, this is huge. If the hormones are off, that's a stress on the adrenals. I can't tell you how many times I've avoided putting somebody on an adrenal protocol or even adrenal supplement period by fixing the thyroid and fixing the hormones, giving hormones. Now we've relieved that stress, which is a withdrawal from that adrenal bank account, and now the patient can start to deposit more into that adrenal bank account, and symptoms that we're not even directly treating start to go away. I love science, and so this is a cool science fact for you about the thyroid and cortisol. So cortisol and the thyroid, the adrenals and the thyroid, very connected. We often talk about the HPATG, the axis keeps growing, but the hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, gonadal, axis, they're all connected. So one really cool thing is the thyroid puts out T4, primarily T4, which then gets converted in our peripheral tissues, liver, kidneys, to T3, which is the mostly active thyroid hormone. But if you are high stress and high cortisol or deficient in selenium or iodine, you do not convert T4 as efficiently to T3. You convert more to reverse T3, which is not as active, not active. So if you're under stress, you're gonna put more down that inactive thyroid pathway versus the active pathway. So that's only one way that cortisol and the thyroid have a really, really important connection. Here's another really cool thing. Well, maybe not so cool if you're experiencing it. When cortisol is high, you are insulin resistant, and then you're inflamed. And now you probably crave carbs, because if you're insulin resistant, you're not getting those carbs as energy into your cell. Your cell's energy deficient. You're gonna want more carbs. So there's a lot more to those steps than just that, but that is a really important connection to remember. So again, here we see cortisol is affecting the thyroid. It affects your blood sugar metabolism, your metabolism. So the way that your cells are using and storing energy. So this is really important stuff. This is one of the reasons why I, as a nurse practitioner, especially specialize in functional medicine, almost always do very comprehensive testing, a lot of which is covered by insurance actually. And we will test sex hormones in depth, complete thyroid panel, not just the TSH and T4. I will also test cortisol, and I will test things like insulin and ferritin levels as part of an iron panel, all sorts of things. So I want to make sure I'm looking at that whole spider web, because we want to know that we can affect all those nodes if we need to. So I want to know the full picture. Let me tell you a little bit about my life. I'll let you in. I tend to be quite a stressed person on the inside, and I'll maybe give you a little insight as to why. We have an almost 14-year-old who has high functioning autism, who is a major challenge at home. We then have twins who are not quite 2 years younger, one of whom has pretty significant ADHD, some other issues that matter behaviorally. No, nothing officially diagnosed, but some suspicions, just some defiance and that kind of thing. So, and then our other twin, is wonderful and struggles with some anxiety. Every kid has their struggles. I share this with you to let you know my life generally has a higher degree of difficulty in the parenting realm than many. I have dealt with stress and cortisol challenges and hormone challenges, sleep challenges, weight challenges. And the more I sit with this, the more I realize, especially weight issues, even sleep issues, definitely are rooted in stress, in cortisol. And I think one of the really hard things is stress can be one of those things that seems like the hardest to manage. We can eat well, right? We can exercise. We can even take things to help us sleep better, which, by the way, is a deposit into your adrenal bank account. But that stress piece, because it takes some mental effort and kind of some reflection and it takes time, I feel like that can be the hardest piece to manage. So when you say, oh, but my life is so stressful, I can never get my cortisol under control, I get it. I'm still working on it as well, but I want to tell you about this so that you know that it's a thing, and you know that there is help out there for you. So what can you do just to begin with, before even seeing anybody or reading any books or listening to any podcasts, which you probably have already? Sleep. You have to prioritize sleep. If you're going to bed after 11 p.m., shift that earlier by even 15 minutes every night or every couple nights. The hours before midnight of sleep that you get are the most important for deep sleep. Sunlight is another huge one and free one. Get outside in the morning and the evening at the least without sunglasses. The rays of the sun and the angle of the sun are different at different times of the day, and it actually signals a lot of things to our body, to our cells, to our brain about what they should be doing and how they should be functioning, both in terms of circadian rhythm, but also in terms of how the mitochondria work. And so one of the best things actually that you can do for your mitochondria, energy producers in the cell, is get sunlight without sunglasses. I'm not talking about staring at the sun, but go for a walk at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., whatever it is, without sunglasses, even for 10 or 15 minutes. That's huge. Diet is another huge thing. You don't have to be perfect, but sugars are not your friend. So if you are going to have some sugar, always make sure you're having it after having some fiber, some protein, maybe a little fat, then have the carbs. Never eat carbs alone, or you're going to be on that blood sugar and cortisol roller coaster, and it's hard to get off. Movement is another really important thing. Please don't hear me go do HIIT workouts at the, boot camp gym. When you have adrenal sort of fatigue, when your bank account balance is low, the worst thing you can do is those really high intensity workouts, because that's a massive withdrawal. What I have my patients do are things like yoga, walking, Pilates, lifting heavy weights, but not fast or intense so that your heart rate is at, 80% of max for an hour. We do not want that. Interval training is something that can be done later, the high intensity intervals, and I'll explain to my patients a very specific way of doing that, but we do not want you doing long distance running or anything that's going to keep your heart rate quite high or intermittently high at a very intense level for too long. And a big way to tell if you're doing this the right way is, how do you feel after a workout? Do you feel totally exhausted, like you have to take a nap and you just cannot function the rest of the day? Listen to your body. That was way too much. Or do you feel like maybe you could have kept going a little bit, like it gave you some energy? You're looking for that second thing. Listen to your body, tune in. And then mindfulness. Everybody talks about mindfulness. Is it really a thing? Yes, it's really a thing. You don't have to do anything fancy. A few things that we do these every night before bed. They are actually from Amazon. They're about $180. We use these every single night. 3 minutes of listening to these. You just press the on button on both of them. 3 minutes of this is supposed to be like 30 minutes of meditation. My husband and I do these literally every single night. We travel with these. They're about the size of an Echo Dot or so. And the other thing that we really love is Brain Tap. And this is a headset that goes on. There are lights, actually, infrared or red and blue light. And then there's also lights in the visor that go along with the meditation and the binaural beats. All sorts of science behind this that I won't get into, but that has been super helpful for things like guided meditation and just taking us down, increasing heart rate variability and those kinds of things. So if we're going to view cortisol or adrenals like a bank account, what we want to do is consistently think about what withdrawals are we making? Are there any withdrawals that we can forego? And what deposits are we putting in? This is long-term strategy. This is not a get-rich-quick adrenal scheme that will not work, as is usually the case in the real financial world as well. Get-rich-quick schemes probably aren't your best bet, and they won't work. So think about constantly every day, what can I do to be depositing into my bank account? And what can I do to prevent unnecessary withdrawals? If this sounds interesting, if you think you may be suffering with adrenal fatigue, lots of people are, and they don't realize it until they hear somebody go, explain it. They go, oh, that could be me. We offer free 15-minute discovery calls for potential patients. And so if you're living in a state where we're licensed, it's all on the website, I'd be happy to chat with you and see if your issues are something that we can help you with.